Welcome to Brainstoryum. I'm Tizard, award-winning dreampunk and deeply weird fantasy author, and yes, that's me and my fiction that's deeply weird. Explore and imagine with me the most unexpected story ideas using the surrealist word game of Exquisite Corpse. Find out more and join in at annatizard.com. This is a storytelling challenge unlike anything you've tried before. Hello, imaginative people. I'm Anna Tizard, and this is episode 93 of Brainstoryum. As promised, I am recording this in rather ninja fashion, although not literally in ninja style fashion. I'm squeezing it in because I have just got back from FantasyCon, which took up all of 4 days, well, 3.5 days all in, and it was amazing. I got to meet some wonderful people, fellow authors. It's just so nice to be among your tribe. I would have liked more mingling opportunities. I find it quite difficult to go up to complete strangers at the best of times, and the timetable was jam-packed, so it was often a case of diving from one panel talk to the next. I did have a badge made up especially that said, "Do you write short stories?" And this was quite a good conversation starter at times, because some people would just come up to me and say, yes. And then I could tell them all about Brainstoryum, ask them about what they wrote, give them a business card, a Brainstoryum badge. And when I was feeling brave enough and they looked genuinely interested enough, I'd offer them my weird, hairy-looking sock. It kind of looks like an alien. I'd turned this sock into a shoulder bag and filled it with writing prompts that were curled up into little scrolls. So a strange moment, if they were interested in that, but loads of fun and a way to try and give people a sense of what I do on this show. One of the highlights was eating my lunch, starving hungry, and not quite in the mood for just plonking myself down on a table of like a random group of people in this huge hall. So I'm eating on my own, and this guy just comes up to me and says, "Are you the one that does Exquisite Corpse?" And I was like, yes, how did you know? But of course, when you sign up to the convention, you're invited to put your photo and details of what you write on the FantasyCon website. And this guy had been scrolling through, and the detail jumped out at him because he plays Exquisite Corpse with friends. So it was incredible to have this impromptu discussion with someone who already knows all about the craziness of Exquisite Corpse. Hello, Derek, if you're listening. And it was also reassuring to me that my author photo isn't so out of date that a stranger cannot pick me out of a crowd based on that picture. Yay. A lot of panel talks were on fascinating topics that I didn't necessarily know that much about, and these were the sorts of talks that I was drawn to because I want to learn, I want to find out stuff that I don't know. Examples of these were representation or lack of representation of disability in fantasy worlds, immortal villains that you can't really kill off. I hadn't really thought about this. Ecology in fantasy, tropes in urban fantasy, and so on. And there were a few that I felt were so very much me that I had to go. New Frontiers explored experimental fiction and other forms of extreme oddness in fiction. So I just had to go to that. A lot of this was based around unusual, perhaps more literary movements and styles like slipstream and fragmented narratives, which I don't really write so much of. But when the panel were sort of saying at the end, "Oh, we don't really know if there are any more movements to come in this experimental field of fantasy, like everything's been done before. I was like, nope. And I had to go up and speak to them afterwards and tell them about what I do. Because even if I don't write in an experimental style, I want people to be easily absorbed into my stories and find them easy to read. I think there's a place and a time for these unusual sort of styles and forms of putting a story across, and they can be great tools for our writer's tool bag. But overall, I want to absorb people in quite easily. My methods of coming up with stories are pretty experimental. I cannot find anyone else who does exactly what I do, except my wonderful, talented listeners. And I also feel like in so many of these literary magazines that print short stories, the tone is so often bleak. Dark is one thing, but we need more colour and fun in our lives, not more bleakness. This is my own personal stance. And using a fun word game to create writing prompts, this is far more likely to get your imagination flowing in unexpected directions that tend towards fun and not necessarily depressing stuff. You know what I mean. Come on, people, let's have fun with our imaginations. That's the whole point of reading. So let's work from that angle with our writing and inspiration so we can bring wonder to the world. Anyway, I'll step off my soapbox for a moment there and give you one last anecdote from the weekend. Joanne Harris, who is most famous for Chocolat, which many people do not realise is fantasy. Read it and the series it's a part of and you'll know it is fantasy. It has some very weird magical realism elements in there. So I went to the interview of Joanne Harris, and apart from being blown away by how proactive she is in advocating for authors' rights, which is very interesting, she said something so weird that I had a dream about it that night. I mean, it may have been partly caused by me having fish and chips at something like 9 o'clock at night and going to bed shortly afterwards. But still, what she said is weird enough. To get into the writing zone for a particular book, because Joanne Harris often has 2 or 3 projects on the go at any one time, she doesn't meditate or stretch or go for a run or listen to a particular piece of music, anything like that. She creates a scent for a character in that book. Yes, you heard me correctly. She makes a fragrance based on the main character and then smells it, opens the bottle, takes a sniff, and that's how she keeps this association going with the character and the feel of the story that she's writing, and revives that mood every time she's ready to sit down and work on it. Apparently, this method is taken from Stanislavski's work on method acting. I have some background in acting during my late teens, but I have never heard of this. Maybe I just didn't read quite far enough into Stan the Man's works, which is what we always called him. So I did, yes, fueled by late night fish and chips and the strangeness and wonder of listening to Joanne Harris speaking about this. I dreamt of being at a bar where you could order a cocktail of fragrance rather than an alcoholic drink, which was mixed in front of me using these little dark bottles. And then you could sort of enter a different character's mind by smelling the fragrance. Gosh, there's a story in that for sure. Anyway, that's surely enough yabbering about FantasyCon for now. Will I have more to report back on in the next show? Quite possibly. I have all these thoughts and ideas swimming around my head, and They just need some time to settle before I can work out what I've really learned from being at this, the first convention I've ever been to. Right, so before we try for another 3 rounds of Exquisite Corpse and story brainstorming, I have some fantastic short stories sent in by my listeners based on the prompt from last show, The Mustachioed Collector. Paul Monteith wrote, "The shopkeeper's bell jingled when the door to the Tash and Stash Emporium opened." Nice. Standing by the cash register, shopkeeper Guido saw Mr. Sly enter. "Afternoon, Guido. Wearing the Magnum today?" Mr. Sly remarked. Guido ran a finger over his thick, bushy, well-groomed moustache. "Yes, I woke up feeling playful and flirtatious. The Magnum best fit my mood." Right, Sly said, as he walked by mannequins sporting various lip dusters, muzzle fuzz, and whisker lip curtains. "I have some new product if interested, Guido." "Always interested," he replied as he rubbed his hands together eagerly. "What you got?" Mr. Sly opened his trench coat. Guido's eyes widened with delight when he saw a variety of zip-locked moustaches hanging from Sly's coat lining. "Is that a Sam Elliott?" "That it is," Sly said. "Removed Mr. Elliott's tash using my new laser depilatory knife. Didn't feel a thing. Didn't know it was gone till he looked in a mirror." "It's beautiful. And that tash there?" Guido said, pointing. Sly chuffed delightedly. "Why, that's a Charlie Chaplin, preferred over the Adolf among discerning mustachioed collectors like yourself." A look of sadness came over Guido. So many lip brows, so little time. Oh, this is quite creepy. You've really brought the scene alive with these deliciously monstrous characters. Thank you, Paul Monteith. Nick Vrakar wrote, "The man peeled off his pencil moustache and replaced it with a thick handlebar. He massaged it into place with his thumbs and spoke between his fingers. I am, what can you say, a collector of sorts. I collect things, possessions. You say she is a person. She is not. She is mine." Oh, this is nasty. A snapshot. Chilling and very Halloween. Thank you, Nick. Eric Montgomery wrote, "Brad said he used to work in wine, but he spoke about fermentation the way most people talk about resurrection. His moustache caught the hop dust like gold glitter, each curl groomed to perfect symmetry. He wore it like a signature, as if the rest of him were only there to frame it. Brad was always scribbling in his notebook, tasting from tanks he wasn't assigned to. One night I found him crouched beside a fermenter, murmuring like a priest at a graveside. By morning, the batch was gone. The valves were still sealed." "Probably the mustachioed collector," our master brewer joked, half asleep over his coffee. I laughed too, until I opened the cooler and saw bottles labelled with our names, each one capped, each one certain of what it's become. Ooh, so what's inside these bottles at the end? There's this lingering uncertainty. It feels quite disturbing. Thank you, Eric. Right, well, I think it's time to delve once more into spaces never imagined before, into connections that don't yet exist, into the socks of destiny. That's right, Exquisite Corpse mixes words and phrases from different players into a single sentence that goes describing word noun, action, describing word noun. I'll play 3 rounds to create 3 very weird sentences, doing some brainstorming along the way, and then I'll pick one to draft a short story or scene from. But I'll also be looking for some curious word combinations that could equally work very well as writing prompts for you as much as me. So it's with some trepidation that I reach into the first sock, which is the describing word sock. And our first word is from Delta D, cryptic. What or who was cryptic or difficult to understand, perhaps even encoded? Next word is from Paul Benfield. Jerboa, which is a kind of desert mouse, although having looked them up when I wrote this down, it almost looks like a teeny tiny sort of skinny kangaroo with massive ears. Do with that what you will. But a cryptic jerboa, what's going on there? Maybe it's not a physical or literal jerboa. We shall see what the rest of the Exquisite Corpse implies. Our action is from Chris Machel, bound. Ooh, that made my voice go really deep. Bound. The cryptic jerboa or desert mouse, bound. Ooh. Physically bound or bound some other way? Next word is from Paul Macmillan, also known as Bookmarks L&L. Silver-eyed. Ooh, that is a weird one. This is turning into a very strange Exquisite Corpse. Right, the final word is from Titania Tempest, who uses the hashtag VSS Magic on Blue Sky, which is how we met online. Scrutiny. Whoa, a silver-eyed scrutiny? Good grief. Okay, so the complete Exquisite Corpse, which may not make sense yet, is the cryptic jerboa or desert mouse, bound, the silver-eyed scrutiny. Wow, I think I need some green tea to get going with this one because this is bizarre. Let's give this a stir and see if this makes any difference at all. Right. Okay, so the cryptic jerboa bound in some way. The silver-eyed scrutiny. Okay, first I want to look at the silver-eyed scrutiny. There's nothing like an abstract noun to get your brain just kind of going around in circles, trying to reach for something a bit different. Oh, but it's interesting that it's silver-eyed, not just silver, because scrutiny is about examining something closely, often visually, but I suppose not necessarily. You might be examining something. It makes me think of a judge or an inspector of some kind, or a police detective. Silver-eyed scrutiny. Well, maybe it's a robot or an examiner or an inspector of robots, or a factory or repair shop where robots are repaired or sold or improved. But then let's look back at the rest of the Exquisite Corpse to see if this could possibly come together as one sentence. The cryptic desert mouse binds this inspector in some way. Cryptic, in this context, I'm thinking, could it be a code? is this computer programming that holds the robot inspector, binds them to follow certain rules or patterns of behaviour? And why is this coding named after a jerboa? Why is the program or coding called that? I think jerboas are fast moving, they have long tails, big ears, presumably quite stealthy. There'll be a reason why the inspector of a robot manufacturer or repair shop needs to have these traits or properties, and maybe that would be the way in to try and pull that together. If you're crazy enough to try and pull it together, which I guess I might be, but not before I have explored other options. So let's move on to the second Exquisite Corpse, which begins with a describing word from Alessandro Bozzo. Delicious. Okay, what or who was delicious? Now, just put in your mind, could this be a kind of pudding? See what we've got. This is from Lee Stokey. Pink fairy armadillo. See, this is an actual creature. I know because I looked it up. I thought this was a joke. I thought this wasn't real. I was like, oh, why do people keep sending me things that don't exist? People do not send me things that don't exist. This is a real creature, a real type of armadillo. So, but a delicious pink fairy armadillo. That could be a pudding. It could be a form of ice cream. Oh, God. Okay, I'm not going to judge. I'm just going to take out the next entry, which is an action from Paul Macmillan, also known as Bookmarks L&L. Bargained with. Okay, this is getting weirder and weirder, but just got to keep going and see what happens. The next word is from Mariah. One and only. Wow. The one and only. Oh, final word is from Paul Benfield. Savannah. Okay, this is just getting silly now, but got to go with it, got to explore it, because you never know where these story ideas may be. They hide in plain sight. Certainly when you play the game of Exquisite Corpse. The delicious pink fairy armadillo bargained with the one and only Savannah. So just quickly looking them up again, because I can't remember anything about them other than the fact that these little armadillos are pink and small and cute. Pink fairy armadillos are elusive, solitary, desert-adapted mammals living in deserts and scrubland of Argentina. How weird then that this has come up in the same sentence as a savanna. Not quite a desert, but sort of grassland, scrubland. You don't get many trees there. So it's kind of on the way towards the kind of habitat that this armadillo lives in. And in this, we're told that the delicious pink fairy armadillo bargained with the one and only Savannah. Is the armadillo on the run, chased by predators? Well, it's delicious. And having found these grasslands, the one and only Savannah, so this is in a world where this is an absolute rarity, it has to bargain its way into that environment to its perfect hiding place, perhaps. Can this story be taken literally? Does it work? It feels a bit like a folktale if you're writing from the point of view of an animal. Does anyone do that anymore? Well, actually, It's funny this has come up because I am reading Fraser Armitage's latest sci-fi novel, Cage of Stars, where a robot is on the run and the narrative dips into different characters' points of view, including some animals, and even a river has its own narrative perspective. It's a very unusual approach, but it's amazing, really different. So coming back to this Exquisite Corpse, you could try that, or having thought about it, you might come up with a less literal interpretation of why the delicious pink fairy armadillo bargained with the one and only Savannah. You just have to think, what are these things? Are they people? Do they represent, I don't know, institutions, magazines, cafes and pubs? There's more than one way that you can handle a very weird adjective-noun combination. But I am going to move on to our third and final Exquisite Corpse. Just so we've got our options laid out in front of us. This is from Paul Benfield. Sun-warmed. Next word is from Paul Thomas. Porter. A sun-warmed porter. This makes me feel like this porter isn't really getting on with his job. He's just kind of sitting around soaking up the summer sun. Nothing much is going on in this job. The action is from Mostly Paul, also known as Quantum Fairy on Blue Sky. Ooh, vocally straffed. So this means, yes, I looked this up, vocally strained or caused someone to overwork their voice. Which is weird because I was just thinking about this porter being lazy since his sun warmed. So what's going on there? I quite like it when you find opposites within an Exquisite Corpse. That can sometimes be the way to find the beginnings of a story idea. Next word is from Mariah. Fuming. Oh, well, that would work if someone becomes vocally strained. It might be because they're shouting, because they are fuming so much. Last word. Who or what was fuming? Rachel decides. Paige. Oh, that's weird, and I like it. The sun-warmed porter, vocally straffed, or caused to be vocally strained. The fuming Paige. The fuming Paige. Do we have an enraged poet on our hands? Or someone who runs a very political newspaper or newsletter? Could that even be the name of it? The fuming page? Kind of like the burning pen. So to say that the fuming page is vocally straffed or straffed, don't even know how to pronounce that, as if it's shouting, as if either it's that person who's running the newsletter or writing the fuming page, who's getting a strained voice, or this is a way to say that a poet is struggling to get her words out on the page. Her voice is stifled. So why or how did the sun-warmed porter vocally straff the fuming page? By sitting in the sun, not caring? As a porter, it's his job to deliver the mail, to distribute it amongst the flats or offices in a block. He's done something to frustrate the poet or writer or editor. What if it's the poet's or journalist's office in the block and he's been obstructing her mail? This radical poet whose views are a million miles from his own. What if What if he's been opening her mail? Has he found out some terrible secret about her? Is she bankrupt? Having an affair? Or living a life of corruption, the very type of corruption she bitches about in her publications? So that would be damaging indeed if it got out. There has to be a confrontation between the two characters, bad enough to make her throat sore from shouting. There's something there, potentially, but this is another of those times where I think, as ever, the pause button must come to the rescue, and perhaps a lot of staring into space, I reckon, and some more green tea. So I'm going to try and draft a scene or short story based on one of these exquisite corpses, and you never know, I might think of a whole new interpretation of them. Here goes. He held the page over the smoke, his fingernails already dirted by it. The fumes unfurled, pungent enough to make him choke. So he held his breath, leaned in closer to watch, the rims of his eyes red with the long nights. The amber tongue of this candle, the only light to see by. Shadows danced against the wall, but his gaze did not waver. The smoke coiled upwards in a question mark as it licked the surface of the paper. Scorings, faint, almost invisible, brushed with a delicate dark brown tint, settling deeper into the indentations. Finally, the words he'd been waiting for. He exhaled, and the candle flame sputtered low as if darting for cover. He chuckled, his human jaw sliding into a long lizard grin. In one motion, he stuffed the page into his mouth, then chewed hard. His tongue lapped around the edge of his knife-sharp fangs, ready for his next meal. It would be so much easier now that he had the gift of speech. Well, not quite the English language, but whenever someone spoke to him, they would hear whatever they expected to hear. Really, it was an illusion that reached more into his victims' minds than it did into his own bodily form. But no matter, his transformation was good enough to pass. Next stop, a quiet hotel bar, but for some lonely soul to show herself to him. He sniggered deep in his throat, threw on a jacket, and blew out the candle. The bar looked too bright and busy, so he lurked outside the front, away from the sounds of laughter, and lit a cigarette. A security guard watched him from the doorway, in that non-obvious way they had, in between nodding and smiling at couples and singles strolling up the steps. The smoke lingered bitter in the lizard man's throat, like the promise of words unsaid. The next one will be mine, he told himself. And sure enough, there she was. Little black dress, nervous on tight shoes, fumbling with her phone as if looking for an excuse to go up the steps. The security guard smiled his encouragement at her. The lizard man smiled wider and stepped out of the shadows. A hotel porter, a skinny young thing in a red suit, crossed his path, heaving a suitcase on behalf of some white-haired lady. The older woman darted up the steps, barely glancing at security with all the self-assurance of the rich. The porter struggled with the suitcase as its wheels caught on a step, blocking the creature's view of his next meal. Thinking, "Excuse me," he let out a short rumble of noise from his chest, hesitating, then ducking to one side. "Wait, what did you say?" The porter stared at him, startled. Blue eyes stood out from a heavily tanned face. The lizard man hid the quail of anxiety in his chest, shrugging limply. He murmured again, chewing the edges of this strange language they spoke, willing her to interpret some vague nicety, a touch of an apology. But the woman glared, stood up straighter. "I'm not sure I get your meaning, sir." The lizard man gulped back surprise. They hear what they expect to hear. So what was this porter expecting? That's when he noticed the rings around her eyes, the shadows like bruises. Fine lines pressed brackets around her mouth, where many times she had forced a smile she didn't feel like giving. Yes, a hotel porter had seen a lot of life. Human behaviour was something she'd learned to brace herself against. Her expectations were tainted. From her neck dangled a pendant, a shield knot, an ancient ward against evil. As if in answer, a knot formed in his throat. This was not what he'd been expecting. And that was how, or the beginnings of how, the sun-warmed porter vocally strafed the fuming page. Sort of. I have to say I found this one quite difficult to pull together. I mostly enjoyed that first image of the smoking candle staining the page. Oh yes, because I looked up the word fuming, and it's also a method of exposing, usually wood, to ammonia fumes in order to produce dark tints. So that kind of tempted me away from the anger type of fuming and towards something quite different. But when I tried to write the sun-warmed porter, I couldn't quite settle on this character, and I came up with a few different versions, but every time they kept feeling like a separate idea to this lizard being. I struggled to make the connection between the two. Anyway, it's useful sometimes to reflect on what does work and what doesn't work so well. That's all part of our learning journey as writers. And in a way, what I've written here could be treated as a springboard all of its own. All you have to do is ask questions. What happens to this lizard man now that his cover is blown? Does his visual disguise as a human begin to quiver and fail now that he's lost some of his confidence? Feel free to use this as a writing prompt on its own if this idea intrigues you. I promise you, from experience, I know that whatever you write will be different to whatever anyone else comes up with, because your imagination and writing style are unique. You have to trust me on this. I've just seen it too many times. If you do write something based on this and would like to share, say, up to 250 words on the show, so it could be an extract of something longer, if you write something longer, or just something really short if it comes out that way, drop me a line as per usual, or have a go at, now let me see, what have we got from today? The silver-eyed scrutiny. Now that is an interesting word combination. What could that mean? Scrutiny of what and by whom? How can their eyes or their gaze be silver or have a quality that's related to silveriness? So if you have an idea for the silver-eyed scrutiny, go to annatizard.com, hit the contact button on any page footer, but make sure you submit by the Friday after the release of this show to make sure I have time. That is the silver-eyed scrutiny, or if you have an idea or a bit of a story based on the story I was reading out today with this scary lizard man. Oh, and don't forget that today, Saturday the 8th of November, is the last day on which you can get Eye for Immortality, an award-winning and deeply creepy novel, for a super low price to celebrate the spooky season. Just go to anywhere that you buy ebooks and do a search on Anna Tizard, or you can go to annatizard.com and click the Book of Exquisite Corpse, and you'll find links from there by the book Eye for Immortality. Until next time, go forth and be inspired. hope you enjoyed today's Brainstorium. You can find out more about Exquisite Corpse and my series, The Book of Exquisite Corpse, at annatizard.com. Subscribe to my e-newsletter and you'll get Volume 1 for free. And while you're there, why not submit a few words to the Socks of Destiny on my play page? You may inspire me or inspire yourself to write a unique new story. See you next time.